The dark side of revenue management is you could argue that revenue management is the architect of inflation. Your job really is to bring conflict into that because you're looking for a better way of doing things. If there's a business case and if there's value to unlock, then AI is going to find more and more homes. The majority of this is being in the trenches and understanding the problems. Do I want to test and learn this stuff? Or am I wedded to the way things that we've done this stuff in the past? If you look at the average lifespan now compared to 100 years ago or 150 years ago, it's dramatically different. I think things could be radically different in the next 10 to 20 years with AI. There isn't an easy way around this. You can only be successful if you know stuff. I've been 20 years in retail. The key to revenue management is...
Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Sumner Makin, a partner at Bain & Company, leading much of our work on AI-driven pricing. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Howard Langer, Global Transformation Director for Strategic Revenue Management at Mars. Howard is a recognised leader in consumer pricing and revenue growth management with global experience across pricing strategy, promotions and corporate revenue management. He also chairs the Retail Pricing Forum at RMAPI and lectures on pricing at Warwick and Southampton universities. Beyond business, he's a qualified coach and mentor and even a third Dan black belt in Choi Dak Kwang Do. Howard, it's brilliant to have you here.
Thanks, Sumner. What an introduction. Yeah, and at some point, if we get time on the podcast, I'll tell you what Choi Kwang Do is all about, but let's see how we work.
That would be awesome. Firstly, I'd just like you to start the podcast by finding out sort of the most interesting part of your job title. What does it actually mean to be in charge of global transformation?
Well, we're going through a big transformation in strategic revenue management. That's what we call it. I know revenue management's got a million and one names, but our flavour is strategic revenue management. And this is really about making sure that we are top quartile, recognising the gaps that we have and then building ways of becoming top quartile, whether that's in the digital space or whether that is in human capability and process and smart habits, let's say, in discovering where the value is. So there's a whole set of components about moving ourselves into that space, which is change, and change is not easy. So that's the program that we're on, and I'm leading the digital part of that and all of our digital products and tools.
Fantastic, and it's such a well-known brand that practically everyone listening here will be buying Mars products and enjoying them.
Yeah, that's the joy. I'm actually right now in the pet care part, and so folks don't know that Mars operates a huge pet business across veterinary, but also some of the biggest pet nutrition brands that we know and love, Whiskers and Pedigree and Sheba and all the rest of it. And all of those need prices, and all of those pretty much get promoted. So somehow we've got to work out the right way of doing that, the better way of doing that, and that's what the discipline of revenue management is all about, and that's why I fell in love with it all those years ago.
And I'd be interested to know sort of how you got into it, because I think what I found particularly interesting in your background is that you've both worked on the consumer product side and in the retail side, so you can actually see the whole thing, whereas a lot of people only work in retail or they only work on consumer products. But you've seen the whole lot. So how did you get into it and what have you learnt along the way?
For me, I got into it through a failed job interview. So I went for an interview for a strategy role at Kingfisher here in the UK, big retail company. I wasn't given that, but the commercial director was interested in talking to me about pricing, and they were doing a whole lot of pricing moves, funnily enough, to gain value, market share, and bring prices down to bring home improvement, to the masses. I didn't get the job in strategy, so I don't know what that says about me or what it says about revenue management and pricing, but thankfully I didn't get that role, and I ended up leading pricing in that retailer and found it absolutely fascinating. It's all about the volume. If you understand volume and you understand the volume flows, and the only way you could do that is by understanding customers and shoppers. And in a previous life, I probably would have been a psychologist because I'm just interested in how people behave. And now I found myself in a role trying to predict how people behaved. And then there were financial consequences of that. And then, of course, if you've got control of that understanding of volume, then that puts you in a strong position when you're having conversations with your vendors who may not have that insight or that detail. So very quickly I then could understand that the more I knew at a granular level about shopping behaviour, the more opportunity there was for, in this case, Kingfisher. And so I would bring in more and more technology. So I think technology goes hand in hand with revenue management. But I think the key to revenue management is detail. So yeah, having started in retail, been 20 years in retail, there's this old adage that, retail is detail. You can only be successful if you know stuff at this sort of highly disaggregated level. And that's absolutely true in revenue management. And that's where revenue management can really stand up, partnering with technology, understand that detail, and then bring that to the rest of the business in really lock solid, challenging plans. Spent time here on the CPG side, which is a different sort of clock speed to retail, because obviously you've got your manufacturing, you're looking at innovation years ahead, but then you've still got that really interesting forum of working with your retail buyers to hammer out good deals between the two of you.
Absolutely. Now seems to be, I think, particularly exciting with sort of AI becoming something that boards really care about. It's always been important, I think, in pricing. I don't know how you can do pricing without some proper maths and actually understanding the numbers.
Yep.
But it now seems to be linked to the AI buzz. So what are you seeing in terms of that leadership interest in AI, and how does that affect you, and what does that look like at Mars?
Yeah, well, I think there's always been a tension in the world of revenue management, working with the rest of the teams in an organization. So one of the things about revenue management, yes, it's about detail, yes, it's about technology, but it's also about people and influence. And there's a whole load of folk to influence in revenue management decisions. So you've got, in a retail organization, you've got the buying teams, you've got logistics, you've got supply, you've got marketing, you've got finance, you've potentially got legal, and you've got the retail store teams, and even in CPG, there's a whole set of communities. So how do you, as a revenue manager, your job really is to bring conflict into that, because you're looking for a better way of doing things. Yeah. You're always going to make somebody feel a little bit uneasy. That's unfortunately where revenue management. That's where it is. So you don't necessarily create allies everywhere, and part of that tension has been, if revenue management is going to bring better options, it's pretty much got to have a justification about why it's better. And so a lot of that is based on the technology and the data and the modeling and the accuracy. And so you better have a good alternative. And I think the difference now, what we see is AI conceptually is being welcomed, ushered in, and pushed by senior leaders in organizations. Whereas when I started out, it was much more of a bottom-up approach. When I was introducing technology, I was having to really explain why this was worth its investment. Whereas what's happening, I see now, is you've got leadership expecting AI to be brought into various processes. And so now I think it's easier to bring along technology, or dare I say, get budget for technology, because there's an expectation that technology should be part of the equation in revenue management.
Absolutely. I think that changing that just makes life so much easier. We're not fighting the system, we are delivering what they want. Looking at it historically, why hasn't pricing had the same level of attention as other areas where, marketing, supply chain? It just seems unfortunate. You said earlier, every item has to have a price. You don't get a choice over it. Yeah,
no, completely. I mean, I think that's a little bit peculiar to retail and maybe consumer products, because if you look at other industries like airlines or travel, tourism, and leisure, for the 60s, I would say that those industries, who are can be extremely successful by making sure that their fixed capacity, the revenue against that, has been maximized. So I think we've had revenue management directors in those organizations for quite some time. I think in retail and CPG slightly different, and it is a little bit different to say marketing or digital marketing, where you would say I have to have digital marketeers and they have to be trained up, whereas that question is not necessarily the same for revenue management. You don't have to have revenue managers, because there are folks who are doing revenue management type work already, be they buyers, be they sales folks, or even potentially finance folks. However, I sort of likened it to the difference between self-diagnosis and going to a medical practitioner.
Yeah.
So there is a discipline about great revenue management. But you can do it yourself to a certain level. We were all trying to find better ways for let's say a fuller price, a better mix, a more effective promotional plan that delivers on the financials, and even other metrics. Maybe we can talk a little bit about sustainability, for example. So revenue management offers that opportunity to really investigate those extra seams that take you beyond the sort of the self-diagnosis.
So it's just much more professional and moving from that self-diagnosis to what a doctor would tell you.
Yeah, I think revenue management is a discipline. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And so for those organisations that have invested in revenue management teams and functions, will know this and recognise this, and it's a never-ending journey and a never-ending path to getting better, because it's a story of interweaving capabilities and technologies. Like I say, it's about great people, the influencing ability. It's about the ability to understand the analytics. It's the ability to partner with technology, and its ability to read the P&L and understand where the bodies are buried in that P&L. Yeah. And that brings together a certain set of unique skills that is different to a sales role or different to a trading role. It's related to, but those roles do other elements, and revenue management is very much focused on where is that volume? Where is that profitable volume? What are the levers that can affect that profitable volume? And how am I linking that back to my shoppers, my customers? And that is a discipline in its own right. It's a shame that there aren't a whole load of books and there aren't a whole load of courses that we can all go on and go through that, trajectory. And I'm passionate about, the learning process and helping revenue managers, understand it and get better. But this is a discipline. This is a domain in its own right. And I think it is becoming much more recognised, particularly in the retail and and CP industries. You just need to have a look at the number of roles that are out there. So this is all a good sign.
It's good. It's already professional, but those things that you mentioned in terms of the books, the courses, the certifications, I suppose it's something that isn't on the P&L, in the sense that you won't get a line for promotional spend in the P&L, but it's real money that's left the business.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think that anybody who runs a P&L or a proportion of the P&L and who runs promotions knows they could do things better. I think it's an often quoted number that 2/3 of promotions don't work, something like that. My experience will back that up entirely. When you're working with the sort of margins that typically in mass retail, then that's a big hole. Engineering and architecting a strong P&L is based, of course, not only on the core products that you've got and the assortment that you have, but the lifeblood of that P&L is your base price. And if you've got your base price wrong, then that's a very unstable P&L. Then promotions add in another layer on top, which is all about excitement, which is all about testing and trialing. It's all about price perception. So it has a different role to play. Well, pricing, I always say, is like the deep toe in the ocean, and that's not something you can fight. And promotions are the waves on the top, which is, they're the hero things because you can see them. They're attractive and they look good. But actually, your P&L is based on that deep toe of core-based pricing, and price and promo have to work together. And this is a quite a complex problem, and the more products you have, the deeper that problem is, and it requires discipline and skill and focus and attention, as well as capabilities to engineer something that is going to work for the business. So it is absolutely discipline in its own right.
As you're thinking about talent and hiring the right people to do this sort of role, what sorts of people are you looking for? Who tends to be the people who are really good at it?
Yeah, I think when it boils down to the essence, there's two types of skill sets in revenue management. I think there are what I would call the individual contributors who like to go deep and like to specialize. And then there are those folks who are the influencers and the willing to make their impact and get into those necessary, difficult conversations. And they're two different skill sets, and neither one is better than the other, and they're both needed. I think those are the skill sets. The domains of expertise, again, it's being able to work with technology, it's being able to work with sales, so there needs to be an openness to and a collaboration skill set there, and the ability to look in detail. You need to have an analytical mindset. The thorny question is how do you train folks in this?
Yeah, really.
And actually, my conclusion in being in this space for quite some time is 70% of this is learned in the trenches by experience and practice. We talked about the fact that you can't do a degree in this stuff. There aren't that many courses in it. There's only so much academic stuff out there, let's say. So the majority of this is being in the trenches and understanding the problems, and working and being hopefully coached and mentored by other folks who have been there before. So there isn't an easy way around this. If you want to be a chartered accountant, then, and I was back in the day, I was a chartered accountant. Yes, you've got to do the exams, so you've got to do all of that stuff. We don't have that in revenue management, but in order to also pass your accountancy degrees, you've got to have that experience, that on the job training, and being out and working with clients. And that is really, I think, where the focus is for revenue managers. And also the other thing is having a network and support structure and other contacts within the domain. Being able to speak to other folks, exchange ideas, obviously respectfully and recognizing confidentiality and all of those things. But and also, talking to vendors. Vendors, are spending time thinking about different solutions and methodologies, because there's some value in there. So, being outward facing and connecting and contacting, with vendors and also other folks, who are revenue managing in other domains and disciplines is a great way to spark ideas.
Completely. I think that's almost a list of success factors for anyone who's wanting to make AI actually deliver some value. You talked about that, being able to deal with the rest of the business. Pricing can't be a silo in its own little world. It has to connect to marketing, to trading, all the other different parts of the business. I think that is something that a lot of AI programs could learn from, because they try to do it's just an IT problem. But what you talked about is not an IT problem. It's a business problem with some actual maths behind it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And when you've got folks who are bonused on, hard targets, then quite rightly they're going to want to be scrutinizing suggestions and options that are coming from somebody else. And whether that is somebody else as a human being or somebody else as a agentic AI, let's say, or a system, then you're going to want to scrutinize it. That's human nature, and until the bonusable objectives are changed, then that's going to be the case. I think what we're seeing now is more folks, more sales folks in CP, and more buyers in retail. We're all used to using technology. It's in our pocket, it's on the screens that we're using every day. We all understand that AI is there to help us. We understand that there are these models going on that are either spam filters or models that present for us incrementality on promotions, for example. So I think there's a general recognition now that these types of capabilities are part of our daily world and operation. For the first time Google Maps ever suggested you a route, you've got an optimizer. It's suggesting you something. So it's not too far away for an optimizer suggesting you some better pricing or some better promotions. So I think conceptually, folks on the trading floor and folks in sales, get that. We're not there yet. I think my experience is a third of these folks are adopters, a third of them are skeptical, and a third of them are, I'm not going anywhere near that until somebody proves to me that I'm going to really benefit from that. But I believe in the technology. I've seen what it can do. I brought in price optimization in 2004. When I was at Kingfisher, and I could see what that could do. So I knew that this thing was powerful. The power of bringing maths together and the ability to explain it. And we are seeing that more and more now as people get more comfortable with technology in their daily lives.
That's really powerful. Something you mentioned earlier was about sustainability and the sort of climate obligations. People might think those are quite different things. I mean, one's the price on the packet, and the other is whether it's greenhouse gases or all kinds of other things. So I wonder if you could help us to link the two. Like, how are the two linked?
Yeah, well, we face some significant climate challenges. And we also, anybody working in retail, CP, have financial challenges. We've got budgets to hit. We've got targets to hit. Like I said, revenue management is all about volume and understanding volume and the volume flows. And if you could control and understand that really well, then you are in charge, let's say, or you have a better chance of being in charge of your financial destiny and being able to hit your financial targets. But of course, what we're seeing now with more and more companies with looking at their impact on the planet and also on their people are concerned with the ecological impact that they're having. And then there's always that existing financial impact that they're having. We've got some financial targets to hit. There are regulations, particularly in Europe, for example, on packaging, where there are tariffs and fines if you don't hit certain thresholds, and that builds additional cost into the P&L, as well as let's say doing the right thing and becoming greener overall. So bringing those two things together, I'm really interested in how revenue management can help not only hit our financial targets, but also help us hit our sustainable targets. And on the surface of it, there's quite a lot of conflict there, because if you're bringing additional costs in order to be quote unquote greener, so how are we going to now have a financially sustainable P&L? And I'm really interested in the way that revenue management can bring the two things together. Simply having the data on carbon footprint or your plastic consumption at a SKU level when you're building out your pricing plans, your promo plans, can help you see is my pricing, is my promo calendar moving me towards my sustainable objectives or not. But then when we back it up, because revenue managers tend to look over a multi-year time horizon as well, what are we doing from our portfolio perspective? Are we innovating in such a way where we're bringing in those products that are likely to give us more sustainable quality volume in the future, as well as financially quality volume? So how can we bring in the data to help us scrutinize that and work with not only sustainability teams that are out there, but also trading and sales teams who still have their individual bonus objectives based on volume and all the rest of it. So I really believe that business has a massive role to play for us to tackle the climate change that we have. And I think our trading decisions and our portfolio decisions are at the heart of that. So I can see revenue management being a really important contributor to solving for that particular question. So I'm really excited about the role that revenue management can play in making that happen.
It seems vital if we're going to get it to sort out these problems. Actually integrating it into the core of the business rather than just be some ancillary thing seems absolutely critical.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you can see, sustainability programs over here in an organization, and then the financial P&L and the health and the monthly trading reporting over here. But the two things got to connect, and they connect through, healthy volumes that also deliver the right financial metrics. And that's not easy. This is not easy. The discipline that revenue management has about understanding the volume and the volume flow and being analytical about that, all of that can be brought to bear. It has been brought to bear with a financial lens. So if we can put an environmental lens and bring the two things together, I think that's really exciting. And I think that's a great place for revenue managers to step into, to be part of that solution.
Absolutely. Another trend at the moment is the tariffs, which are another ingredient in there to make life complicated, but also interesting. How are you thinking about that? Is it driving unusual behaviour from consumers or retailers? I don't know, some front loading maybe. What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, it's certainly an interesting time, that's for sure. And being able to, obviously it depends on the network and the logistical network and the manufacturing network that you're in or that you're party to, in terms of your exposure to tariffs. But it's another cost change. So. Just like we had post-COVID with the pinch point on logistics and cost, challenges there, it's a busy time for revenue managers to try and work out, okay, well, how do we play with that new cost environment, and where do we want to move our volumes to and push our volumes in response to that? And it's interesting because one of the sort of the dark side of revenue management is you could argue that revenue management is the architect of inflation, because if you're going to put prices up, where should you put where should you? I don't think revenue managers would quite want to be seen in that way. But we do have instruction, if you like, about our financial targets, but there are different ways that you can reach those financial targets, and there are different consumer groups that you can impact with those financial targets. And so, we see that certain consumer groups are quite stressed at the moment. And then there are other consumer groups who, have a higher ability to absorb price changes, let's say. And so I think one of the dimensions that should always be layered in on the revenue management side is, well, which groups are we impacting most? Because that gives us the financial health that we're looking for as businesses. We are we're not charities, organisations we work for, we've got financial objectives, but also you've got to be thinking about, whether it's the brands that you're selling or whether it's the price perception, that you have as a retailer, as to which consumer groups you want to protect and which consumer groups are less concerned about those price changes and price perception can be influenced through other means. Because price perception is a combination of things, the base price, the promo, the messaging that we're all getting. If you're a retailer, look and feel of that store, the flow of the store, the assortment, the price point gap that you can see within that range. All of these things are, influence price perception, and that's that we need to understand the different strata of customers that are out there. So tariffs, exciting time for revenue managers for sure. It's time for revenue managers. That's when this group sort of steps up and brings some options to the table. But we need to preserve our core customer base and make sure that we're not stressing them. And that requires you to know who are they, who are the shoppers, and what do we need to do in order to have healthy forward momentum and continued volume with those shopper strata.
Super tricky as well, because if costs are going up, inflation is not a choice. We don't get to choose. We have to do it in a way that protects the customers, particularly those you mentioned who are most price sensitive. But we can't just absorb the costs ourselves because the costs just keep going up.
No, absolutely. There's a commercial reality here. And within that commercial reality, there are different choices that we can make. So the question is, well, what are the smart choices for the brands that we have, for the brand that we own, for the overall price perception in our stores and for our brands? And that's the fascination of this space, because revenue management is as much about consumer psychology as it is about AI and the data and the processing and all of those sorts of things. So I think that's another added nuance. You always need to be thinking in revenue management that at the end of the day, the end consumer pays our salaries. So which end consumers are we most interested in? How are we going to work with them? How are we going to present ourselves when it comes to assortment, distribution, price pack, pricing, promotions, and mix? We've got a bunch of levers to present ourselves well, and every day is an experiment. And that's the great thing about particularly price and promotions. If you get it wrong, pretty quickly, and you can adjust because every day is an experiment, and price perception changes very, very frequently, particularly now. So that's the other interesting area is the domain where you can get feedback really, really quite quickly, and then have to adjust. I like that.
Thank you. And having thought about what's the immediate issues with climate change and tariffs, I'd like to think a little bit further in the future. Like when you're looking at the innovation in retailers today, where do you see AI making the biggest impact in terms of revenue management? How can we shape it?
Yeah, well, I think with retail, it's a much more diverse channel set now. With different delivery mechanisms and quick commerce, as well as all the e-com platforms. So it's a more sophisticated channel mix, as well as if you're a retailer, understanding the nuances, the differences in your estate, in your retail estate. And again, if you're a retailer, the great news is you've got a whole heap of data, and that's great news if you want to apply technology on the top. So I can see AI and more sophisticated machine learning techniques really bringing better accuracy to and more granular, disaggregated decision making. And then the flip side of that is the question of, well, where do I spend my my media dollars and my advertising dollars? And if you're on the consumer product side, the retail media expenditure, all of those things are a broader and more holistic set of decisions, which is absolutely ideally placed for AI. Not all retailers and CP firms are there. There's still quite siloed thinking in many organizations. It is challenging to bring that data together and to look at price, promo, and let's say media spend all together. That's not easy to do because it cuts across hierarchies. It cuts across budget owners and P&L, internal P&L holders, and that's going to require collaboration. To me, it comes back to the shopper groups. What are we doing? Which shopper groups are we really targeting in the right way? and which investments do we really want to make, as a whole, so that the experience of those shoppers are what we want. And that lens, that's a different lens to looking at through straight P&L or straight sort of siloed organizations. That's, well, if you can do that, then you're offering a great proposition to your priority shopper groups, and all of the elements of price and promo and media and comms and assortment and mix come together. That's really when the shopper feels at home, and they're almost thinking, how did they know that I wanted all of this stuff? But this is what I want. This is the right place for me to shop. It sounds easy, but of course that's quite a challenge. And AI can play a big role in that because of there's a lot of data cutting across all of those dimensions. So that's a great sandbox.
And thinking about that AI, as things seem to be developing quite quickly, particularly in the Gen AI side, how do you see that changing things? Because thinking about what you did back in 2004 when the use of the first price optimization systems, we've come quite a way in 20 years. In fact, I think further than I'd ever expected it to go. How do you think the newest technology is likely to change things?
Yeah, I think we have come away in some respects, and yet we've still got quite a lot of way to go in others. So I think on the organizational side, there's still a way to go.
Yeah.
The embracing of the sort of new value that this technology can bring. On the technology side, of course, we're leaping ahead in significantly. So the cost of this type of technology is way cheaper than it was 20 years ago. I'm not going to reveal how much it cost 20 years ago, but even then it was quite a big sum, whereas now it's let's say accessible to most organizations. So I think that it's a mindset thing within an organization that wants to leverage that data and leverage those models. There's an element of trust that you place in the models, whether it's regression models or some of the more sophisticated neural networks or other techniques. The proof is in the pudding. So the question becomes, do I want to test and learn this stuff, or am I wedded to the way things that we've done this stuff in the past? And how quickly can we push the boundaries of acceptable AI in this organization?
Yeah.
So, there are technology companies themselves who are pushing that, almost at light speed. And then there are other domains and industry types where that's less the case. And I think within retail and CP, they're getting there for sure and testing out. I mean, I don't think there's a retail organization or a CP company that isn't going through a digital transformation.
Yeah.
So, everybody's going through that. And a big part of that is, how we as associates and team members in companies are willing to adopt, the new technology is there. So if there's a business case and if there's value to unlock, then AI is going to find more and more homes. And I think, pretty much right now there's some stressed P&Ls out there.
Yeah.
And there is a enhanced desire, I think, from leadership to look to technology as an enabler of quality growth. So I think that's a good environment to test out something which organizations may have been reluctant to do in the past. So I'm expecting to see more retailers and CP companies experimenting and introducing new types of technology over the next 2 to 3 years as a way of really disaggregating and getting into the detail of ways that we can unlock new seams of value in the P&L. Just
such an exciting time.
It is. I mean, it's a great space. It's a great domain. I would say that I've been in it 20 years, so I'm a bit of a I'm a fan, a bit of a nerd in this space. I've seen many changes in that time. Technology is pretty much ready, so it's now a question of who's going to step up to the plate and start to embrace that in deeper seams to really extract that value. And we're not all going to get it right. We're not all going to get it right. So this will take some time for us to play with. But if you've got the right safeguards, if you've got good business judgment that sits over the top of the AI, then you will see those use cases start to come through, and then confidence builds. Like any revolution, it starts slowly and then snowballs. I think AI has a massive role to play in this domain over the next 5-10 years.
Just sort of thinking more, even more generally, and I'm a brand new dad, got this baby boy, and I'm wondering what his life is going to be like and how different it's going to be. I mean, projecting 10 to 20 years into the future about his first job is just crazy. I can't even think 20 months, let alone 20 years. What do you think, what sort of most excites you about what that world might look like for him and indeed, your children? How do you think things will change? What really makes you smile?
Well, this is dangerous territory, isn't it? Predicting
Nothing like
what's going
speculation.
to happen. Yeah, I think what I'm most interested in and optimistic about and excited about is how AI can help us in healthcare, actually.
Yeah.
And to help us with more advanced, quicker diagnostics, for example.
Yeah.
And also unlocking some of these, enormous mathematical problems about how the human body works and how it doesn't work. There are many medical issues out there waiting to be enhanced and worked on and improved. And I think the computational power that we have now, the cost of the computational power plus the mathematical ability for some of these models to sit themselves across over this data, that's got to be a huge potential for society in general. So,
Yeah.
if you look at the average lifespan now compared to 100 years ago or 150 years ago, it's dramatically different.
Yeah.
We still have lots of diseases and conditions out there that we know a decent amount about, but are unable to apply ourselves and leverage solutions to. So that for me, I think things could be radically different in the next 10 to 20 years with AI applying itself to that area.
I agree. Healthcare is so important. Let's hope that it really does mean a better world.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Well, thank you very much for being willing to chat about it. I think pricing and AI really are the two topics which really drive, I think, both of us. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I love the area. I love the domain. Anything I do to promote this domain, I welcome with both hands. And yeah, like you say, you and I have both seen the benefits of doing this well, seen the challenges of doing it less well. Technology combined with revenue management as discipline has massive promise. And what better time to apply that now? So, I think we'll have many stories over the next 5 to 10 years about how the two things have come together and been successful. And I really appreciate just having the chance to geek out and talk a little bit about pricing and AI.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Sumner.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good day. See ya.